Really.
Wow. Recording in
You
progress.
can always just know that we're always trying to change it up for you.
It's Friday, first of all.
It's Earth Day.
And it's Earth Day.
Happy Earth Day.
Happy Earth
Faith is
Day.
psyched. Hey, Faith.
My toes are freezing.
Kathy, it's not a time to talk about your feet.
I'm sorry, didn't we just see your clogs?
What?
Coldest April
Yeah.
on record.
You've been called out, Amy.
I don't think she heard me. Oh yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah. This is what's happening down below. That sounded
Coldest
weird.
April on who said that?
For
Hey,
us in the
take 'em off.
Northwest.
Yeah, it's flipping freezing, isn't
Yep.
it?
Yep.
Ah.
Yeah.
Kathy,
It's
you watch your
warmer
mouth
today.
for that flipping freezing.
Well, yeah, I can no more F-bombs.
You no more of those F-bombs.
Well, not
Come
being
on.
recorded for posterity. It's not a good look.
You know, it's funny. We have all our YouTube, all the Feedback Friday videos, except for like the last 10 or so is up on YouTube right now. And if you just hover over each one, it becomes animated with video. And all of a sudden it's like Kathy going, or me going. It's so weird. You just kind of move in it, or it's like one of our presenters, or it's so funny. You'll have to
You
see
know,
it. I
it's
can't explain it.
like embarrassing. There was one that I was looking at the other. Oh, it was the one because we had a link to Katrina Rodabaugh and Ursula de Castro.
I took it out because you didn't like it.
No, it was, but I mean, I don't know. I was complaining.
You were talking about you were having like the worst day of your life or something.
Yeah. I mean,
Which-
who wants to hear that?
I mean, yeah, who wants to? This is about fun.
This is fun. All right, we're fun.
This is so much fun. If you
How
guys
are
don't
we
want to have
doing?
fun, shouldn't be here.
Hey, Amy, how are we doing?
They are coming in fast and furious.
Okay.
Can't you see my eyes darting sideways?
Tokyo Drift. Got
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, I'm going Tokyo Drift.
Yeah.
Oh
I had no
my
clue what
God.
that meant.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's from Fast and Furious, which is weird that you would know that. Like, I think it's like when you have a rear spoiler on a car and you go fast around a corner and you do the shh with your whole car.
Yeah, you're like sliding. It's a sliding thing.
Yeah, I do that in my 2005 Toyota Sienna
But I mean, if you've
minivan.
ever been to Tokyo, there's like hardly any places where you could do that kind of sliding and not hit something.
I think that should be a really good, maybe we have a get together where we're doing Tokyo drifts.
But not in
Sometime.
Tokyo, right? I mean,
Probably
like-
in Wyoming with Karen.
or you know that desert place
Open space.
outside of Las Vegas where you can like break the speed barrier or something in
Yep.
a car.
Uh-huh.
There you'd have a lot of room if you slid a little.
We could do that. We could also do a smash 'em up derby kind of a thing too.
Ugh. I don't think I'm in the right age for that anymore.
I don't know if I want whiplash.
No whiplash.
I just want to
Okay.
say welcome back to Kip Inglis. I see
Yes.
Kip.
Hello,
Surgery.
Kip.
Hopefully Kip's healing.
Kip's healing.
Yep.
Got a follow-up appointment today.
Yep.
It's good. All right, Amy, are you
Yes,
ready?
ma'am.
Do we have
Yeah.
the chorus here? The dancers?
Okay. I'm gonna
Everyone?
go be slow and intentional today, so I don't say, "Oh no, I messed up again."
The rhythm section.
Rhythm section ready?
Count us in,
Oh,
Amy.
okay. Let's see. Have you all muted yourselves? No.
Uh-oh, the mute police are here.
Mute police. Okay. All right.
Well, it's the end of the week. Now where you been? Well, now it's Feedback Friday, so come on in. Come sit down and stare at your screen. We got a presenter that you never seen. we're Feedback Friday, we're on the loose. We'll be the train, you be the caboose. It's Feedback Friday with Kathy and Amy. Mashed potatoes and the gravy. It's Feedback Friday all day long. Feedback, feedback, Feedback Friday.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's Feedback Friday, and it is Friday, and it's Earth Day, and it's someone's birthday. I mean, we got a lot of stuff going on here. Welcome, welcome. I'm Kathy Hattori, president of Botanical Colors, and joining me from Cape Cod is Amy Dufault, our director of communications and sustainability. And we are really pleased that you are joining us for Feedback Friday, episode 94, our weekly show where we speak with artists, dyers, scientists, historians, activists, all sorts of folks who are interested in natural color, textiles, and dyes. And joining us today, we have Karen Vaughan of the Art of Soil. Karen is joining us from Laramie, Wyoming. And she is, man, she's got the bona fides. That's all I have to say. She's a researcher, educator, and a creative who's passionate about sharing soil's knowledge. She's a pigment forager, which is basically one of our favorite kind of people, and a paint maker, as well as an associate professor of pedology at the University of Wyoming. She's been long fascinated by color. She comes from a family of pigmenters, from the information we gather from color to the way it makes us feel and the unique connections we all have with color. Through her company, I'm going to say it's your company, right, Karen? Yeah, through her company, The Art of Soil, she crafts watercolor paints made from soil as an ecologically responsible alternative for creating. And if you're going to have the opportunity to see the things that she creates, they're absolutely just like these little jewel boxes of wonder that are you look at them and you just feel like, oh my God, these are so great. So yeah, have a look at those too. Before we start, I just want to say thank you to everyone. We're hoping we're at the tail end of the pandemic. Boosters are available if you want one. And we're starting to travel a little bit again, which is great. So very excited that you've been able to support us all this time. And we couldn't have done it without you, and want to thank you for your support. Just some housekeeping notes. Amy is the moderator and will be monitoring chat on this presentation. Chat will open after Karen gives her presentation. And Amy is just going to read those to you, Karen. You don't have to be reading the chat and trying to figure out what your answer is. We're also going to ask you to mute for the presentation, but then we'll open it up at the end to say hello and goodbye and happy Earth Day. The call's being recorded and we'll have a copy ready for you. I just have to give Amy the password so she can load them onto YouTube, and then those will be ready for you, along with any additional information that comes from this call. So without any further ado, I just want to say welcome, Karen. We're so thrilled to have you and to hear your fascinating story.
Right. Well, good morning, everyone. Let's see. Let me pop my screen up here. Okay, well, thank you so much, Kathy and Amy, for inviting me to speak with this wonderful group. I've attended many of your Feedback Fridays, so I knew what to expect. I was really excited for the theme song. But to be able to deliver this talk on Earth Day it makes me even that much more excited. Like many of you, every day is Earth Day, but I don't hesitate to take an opportunity to celebrate our beautiful planet Earth that we all get to live on and live with. I'm not going to tell you what each of these words is. They are a single word written in many different languages, and I hope you recognize at least one or two or three of these. If you can see them, I'll pop it up at the end and make sure you can have a second look. Okay. So I am a soil scientist by training. I have worn my soil scientist hat for 20 years, for my entire adult life. I started off as a pedology graduate student. Pedology is the study of soil formation. So how soils develop and change over space and time on a landscape. Soils are acted upon by factors of climate, elevation and slope and organisms and the underlying geologic materials. And that's how we get this variety of soils. We're not doing that talk today. We'll do a little. But today I'm just really excited to be here to weave together these two real strong passions that I have of soil science and art. And so we'll start with really a rudimentary definition of soils. Like many things, soils are composed of organic and inorganic materials. And really the main difference between that is that organic materials have a carbon to hydrogen bond. So organic materials are living or formerly living materials. So think of organic matter, that earthy, beautiful smelling, rich material that is usually in the upper part of soils because plant roots are part of that organic material. They're sending down organic carbon and pumping that into the soil. Soils are a huge player in the global carbon cycle. Fungi, tons of vertebrates. So burrowing owls, small rodents, foxes, anything that spends even a tiny part of its life cycle below ground is a soil organism. And then there's the invertebrates, the millions and billions and trillions of bacteria and viruses that inhabit the soil, the earthworm, of course. And then let's see, humus and duff, those are varying levels of decomposition of those organic materials, and then also charcoal and many, many other materials. But what we're going to focus on today are the parts of the soil that really are important as pigmenting agents. Of course, organic matter is brown, but it's difficult to make really good artistic materials, or I should say refined paints with organic materials, but we'll get there. So here's a handful of minerals that are probably familiar to some of you. The iron oxides, you can kind of see the orange and yellow hues. Of course, hematite ranges from a beautiful purple to a bright red to every color in between. Goethite, I feel like I'm wearing my goethite shirt today. Lepidocrosite is another iron oxide. Ferrihydrite is one that's real important in my science side of work. Bernacite is a manganese oxide. That's usually a kind of a darker purple than I've shown there. Green minerals like glauconite, serpentinite, olivine, and then some whitish ones, calcite. There's a lot of calcite and other salts out here in southeastern Wyoming where it's really, really dry. And blue, I know blue is very special. I think Kathy and Amy will probably mention their indigo launch today. We were just chatting about that, but within soils, the only blue mineral I've come across very sparingly is an iron phosphate mineral called vivianite, which is gorgeous. Okay, so how did I get into this idea of considering art? I mean, I'll walk you through a little bit of that pathway, but so I started out as a student studying soils, and I started gaining a strong appreciation for soils through wetlands. Wetlands are dynamic systems that have a fluctuating water table that results in generally a lot of organic matter at the surface. You can see those dark sort of layers on top of both of these soils, but it was those oranges and reds that I saw deep down below. And so I knew as a scientist that those orange colors were telling me about the biogeochemical environment in the soil, but gosh, they were also so pretty. You can see on this left-hand side here, the lighter yellow goethite, strongly crystallized minerals. And then up here, these are stains of ferrihydrite. And so these are oxidized at this point. You're looking at a 2D cut through the soil. It is dry at this point. And so those colors are observable. When that water table would rise in the soil, a microbially mediated reduction reaction, which basically just means that microorganisms are using the iron oxides and other components as an electron acceptor. And so what would happen is that this oxidized iron would convert to reduced, it would turn light gray. So you could see color change over seasons. And that was absolutely fascinating to me. This soil over here has a little bit of water table action here, but this material down at the bottom is called plinthite. If you've ever been somewhere where it's really hot and humid, there's not a lot of rocks in the environment because they've been decomposed, they've been broken down already. This material can be cut out of the earth, and once it's set on land and dried, it'll irreversibly harden and can be used as building materials. So as I said, okay, so scientist lens, artist lens. One thing I didn't mention is that I struggled for a long time to actually call myself an artist, because throughout my education, I earned a master's degree and a PhD, and I was a scientist, and I was a professional and a professor. And so my identity was really wrapped up in that. And it wasn't until a few years ago where I was like, wait a minute, I love fiber, and I love arts, and I'm a weaver and a knitter, and I do all these things. I'm also an artist. And so that's maybe just a little plug to remind everybody out there that we can wear many hats. And in fact, we should probably wear them in all the spaces. I used to be really careful about what I talked about in my academic career in terms of my outreach and my really fascination with color. And now it's too late. It's all over the place. So we got into the art that I'm going to share with you today because I'm a parent, because I had children, and because we would take our art supplies and dump them on the table, and I had time to create, and I had time to spend with my children, and I tried to come up with creative activities that would keep us busy, keep us out of the house. And so we started doing these rainbow scavenger hunts, and we would get on our bikes and we'd be like, all right, let's see if we can go in this direction and find as many colors as we can of the soil. And so what you're looking at is a box that's filled with all of the soils except that dark black soil are soils that we collected within a bike ride from our home, probably on 1 or 2 adventures. The soil on the left is actually a really important soil to our family. It's an organic rich shrink swell clay, so a smectitic clay that shrinks and swells upon wetting and drying, terrible for making watercolor paint. But it's the soil that my children were born on in California. So we always keep a little bit of that around. So as a scientist and as an artist, like I said, I keep bringing up this idea of color. And I know that I'm talking to the right audience here because you're all fascinated by natural colors, dyeing, all sorts of things in between. So these samples were collected in Wyoming, except this beautiful celadon green. This is a Utah soil that we collected on our travels. And what I try to do with color and with soils is to use it as a communication tool. Everyone, I can't think of a person who wouldn't look at this picture and be like, wow, what is that? And then to tell them that it's soil, that's where the conversation can really get started. So I want to frame my talk today with these 4 kind of central ideas. I am not going to spend much time beyond the next couple of sentences on this first one. Soils sustain life. I hope and I assume that you understand that soils are absolutely critical for the production and nourishing of plants for food and fiber production. That goes without saying, and we can talk about that a whole nother time. I really want to focus in on this idea that soils are beautiful. Soils as an entity in and of themselves have natural beauty, and they also tell a story. Every soil tells a story, and most often it's their story. It's the story of how that soil came to be and what that soil means to people. So it could be a cultural story, or a story of development, or a story of devastation of a volcanic eruption. And then this last idea that soils are advocates is through those stories, soils can serve as the advocating entity of affecting change. So through my art practice, I use art as a vehicle through which I encourage connection between people and soils. And so by sharing a picture of soil or by having someone new interact with watercolor paints made with soil, I hope that we're just moving a little bit, if everyone moves just a tiny bit in the direction of learning a little bit more and appreciating a little bit more, then my work here is done. So sometimes I communicate through pictures, and Amy put this exact picture up there and I had shared it with her. So of course she did. But these are pictures of soil drying on a metal baking sheet. And you would think, how is that exciting? Well, it's absolutely exciting. Look at the variety of colors here. And I know this picture must resonate with a lot of you. And they're not even the brightest and most diverse colors that are out there, but the texture and the way that these soils crack when exposed to, to air as I dry them out before creating paint with them is just absolutely beautiful. And then sometimes I'll show pictures that are a little bit more dramatic, showing some of the variety of colors. All the colors you're looking at here are natural soil minerals. I do within my work use synthetic pigments. They're always non-toxic synthetic pigments. I love science. I'm grateful for science, and I'm glad we can get those bright blues and greens and purples that are really, really hard to come about in nature in quantities that I would be comfortable sampling. But so this was a little poster I made as a result of one of our very early COVID scavenger hunts for soils with my kids. In soil science, we use the Munsell color notation, so you can see those notations there. And let's see, these are just little presses with my muller, my watercolor, my glass muller. I'll show you a little bit more about that too. So the idea that soils tell a story. This is a really special set of paintings that I made in response to earning tenure. So I have moved a lot in my career, in my life, in my academic career, and these soils are all integral to the path towards that academic accomplishment. And I wanted to reflect upon that and share it with people who were special throughout that process. So the first one, I was born in Rhode Island. I stepped into my first wetland soil, hydric soil in Delaware, did some work in Florida, and you can see sort of the pathway. I earned my PhD studying organic soil and very brand new baby volcanic soil formation at Craters of the Moon National Monument and Preserve. So I would highly recommend going there. So in this case, this soil is telling the story of my progression to where I am today. And we all have a story with soil, I'm sure of it. So this isn't soil, this is coal, but I guess I also interact with many geologic materials as well. I am currently living in Wyoming. I live in a 100-year-old plus house that was at some point in time heated with coal, and it's very cold here. And I've lived in Rhode Island and Utah and Idaho. I've lived in cold places, but there's nothing like Wyoming. We have long winters, and probably a lot of coal went into heating this home before we were living there. In fact, we removed the old coal chute out of what is now my husband's office in the basement. So there's coal in our backyard. There's coal in our alley. There's hunks of this stuff. In the beginning, we would put it in our children's stockings at Christmas time, just as a joke. And anyway, with this coal, it's a controversial issue in terms of an energy source, but nobody can argue about its beauty. When you grind up this coal, this formerly living organic material that was pressed down into a sedimentary rock and then reawaken it as watercolor paint, it's phenomenal. So while I was making that coal into paint, we were doing some construction. We were putting up a fence and reorganizing our backyard. So we were digging a lot of fence holes. And so we pulled out this beautiful ombre brown suite of colors. And I refer to this as our backyard palette. My favorite color is brown. Of the browns here, I would say it most closely This color is my favorite, dark chocolate brown. And what I did with this palette is I handed it out to our neighbors because they're also living with and on this soil. And so they would have a great appreciation for our neighborhood's backyard soil. So if you were my neighbor, you would get lots of little packages, wanted and unwanted. But so through my art practice of making paint and now this business of making paint, I'm just amazed at the ways that we can communicate with people, with our environment by using natural materials. Recently, sorry, all of our faces are covering. Oh, no, I didn't put it there, but I'm using this as an example of soils as an advocate. And, there's a lot going on in the world, and one in particular that struck a chord with many is the Russian invasion of the Ukraine. And so through watercolor paints, we were able to solicit donations to various funds that are helping folks. And so people want to do something, and people want to interact in a way that's meaningful. And it's remarkable how this creating paint can do that. Okay, so I'm going to walk you through, checking my time here. I make watercolor paints from soil, and this is exactly what I mean. I take soil, and sometimes it's straight soil, and sometimes it's soil with additional natural pigments that attain a color that I'm looking for. But I also use synthetic pigments to get those really bright blues and greens and purples that I mentioned. And then I add that with a watercolor media. And if you're interested in this, I can share a starter recipe with anyone who's interested at some point. But so what you have here is soil that's been put in a mason jar with water, because what I ultimately want is this really fine, the fine particles of soil. So here are some tools of the trade. If you were interested in making paint, if you're interested in making watercolor paint or acrylic or oil, just swap out watercolor media for whatever your media of choice might be. But it's pretty simple to get going. A glass muller, if you're going to get into it, I would recommend one. I started out with a marble bud vase, and then when I got the muller, I was like, oh, this is a beautiful process. I will invest in myself. For my business, I also have a mechanized miller to create artist grade watercolor paint that I sell. But honestly, every single color that I test and I try is always on this slab. So I can sort of tweak my recipes for every pigment. Okay, so how to get started. You want to start with a color that you like. And so this is just a mixed up picture of the same bags of soil from a beautiful location that I was able to go to. You can't see it in the picture as well, but this was just like this wild pink that I had never seen in soil before. And these are kind of purple. So color that you want, every color is beautiful and can be beautiful. But I want to remind you that soil, those minerals in soil that make up that inorganic fraction, come in all sizes. You've obviously felt sandy soil. You've been in sticky clayey soil. And then in the middle would be something with a lot of silt. What you're looking at here are jars of sand. These are all sand. This is very fine, medium, coarse, and very coarse sand. Soil are all of the particles up to 2 millimeters in diameter. And so the coarsest sand is 2 millimeters. And when we're making watercolor paints or other paints, unless you want it to be gritty and earthy and that's what you're going for, a textured look, I get rid of all the sand. And so I do that through using water and properties of particles that settle via Stokes' law. It sounds fancy, but I basically use a 5-gallon bucket or one of those big mason jars to make that happen. Ooh. I didn't do my, I forgot what I was going to say in the middle there, but what I want to show you here is a soil that I'm going to take from hunk of earth to watercolor paint. This is a very special location. It is, it's in Sunrise, Wyoming, present day Sunrise, Wyoming. And this is not a picture of a paleo Indian ochre mine, but adjacent, maybe like 3 miles away, same material. We certainly did not sample anywhere near there. There's a 13,000-year-old Paleo-Indian ochre mine, and this absolutely gorgeous micaceous hematite rich material barely needed any work to make it an art supply. So I took that material and put it in a jar, put it in water, shake it, shake it, shake it, separate all those particles. And after about 60 to 90 seconds, all of the sand particles will settle and everything left up in solution will be silt and clay. I let it settle a little bit longer. If I'm using soil that has a lot of organic matter, I put it through several sieves. But in general, I'm working with clay and generally fine silt. So I'll dry that material, separate the core fraction, and then mold together with watercolor media that I mentioned before. And so this is in the stage where I've already added the watercolor media, and I'm just using that muller to coat every single particle of soil with that media, so it'll act as watercolor paint. This is a particularly beautiful and very staining ochre to use. I feel so honored to be able to make paint from it. But you can see that here. And here I'm just doing a couple little quick swatches. And what I want to just show you is just the depth of color that you can get from one color. And as I add it in its, the strongest form there, you can see it's almost got a little bit of an orange hint to it. The orange is coming in here. It's such a strong color that it's definitely turning more orange. You can kind of see that bronze at the top, and I'm waiting for the point where I'm going to dip my brush back in that puddle of material. But you can even see in the water, the mica that's just swirly around. This color is just fabulous. So here I'm poking at that little spot, and you can see the change in that material because of that mica that's present. So I will say the lighting in this video is a little bit off. This next one is a little bit more reflective of the actual color. It's like pinkish, bronzish, orangish beauty that I'm so fortunate to have been invited out to this site to go and sample. And again, I do mention here that I was on Arapaho, Cheyenne, and Sioux native lands, past, present, future, and I did have permission to be there. And that's really important when you're collecting any sort of plant, mineral, geologic material. Make sure that you have permission to be sampling, and be conservative about the amount of material that you take along with you. Okay, so there was a beautiful little field trip. What I want to share with you here are a couple ways that soils can be advocates. And so making beautiful paint is really fun. And I did it for a while without sharing it widely. And then when I started sharing it, it became more of what is the story behind these watercolor paints. This one was a really special one that was actually a friend of mine, now friend, after we interacted. She wrote a Smithsonian article about this palette, and I can share it with anyone who's interested. But it came about when, in the summer, in the Western US, in a lot of places in the world, we have wildfires. We had ash raining down in our backyard, and you see that sun through that cloud smoked lens. And I knew I wanted to do something to highlight that, and to also project the devastation and the beauty of what was happening. And so this color here, I tried to get a color that matched in my mind the wildfire sun that you see through that haze. All of these pigments had a little bit of that ash mold in there with them. This one here is a this is a long story. It's a clay that was bypassed by several of the last glaciations. So I've named it Resilience. It's a beautiful orange clay up in the Snowy Range Mountains outside of my town. This signifies hope, recovery, melting glacial ice, erosion, soil organic carbon, and then the wildfire itself. So you can read more about that if you're interested. I painted my climate stripes. So one stripe for every year that I am alive. I'm still here. I don't count them because I might have missed one. It's like, how many years old am I? But there should be a stripe. And then I referred back to the continental US because I've moved so much. So my climate has changed because of my location. But and I thought this was a fun way to observe how our climate's been impacted as a result of global warming. I also create palettes that are inspired by place. This is an example of an ecosystem inspired palette. This is a beautiful spring within Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. And it's one of my favorite color palettes personally. And then here's another one in Death Valley National Park. These soils are not collected at these locations. That is illegal. I don't support that. I don't suggest that you do that. These are inspired by place. And then these colors I created to kind of match some of the landscapes when I was spending time in both of these locations. And then this is a recent palette here. So as a soil scientist, this was a little bit of a tongue-in-cheek kind of joke, but then it became a communication tool. So carbon is very important in our system to understand these different pools of carbon. And scientists like to put names on things. And so instead of just calling carbon all carbon, we as a collective, as humanity, have started using these colors of black carbon to signify carbon through the incomplete combustion of organic materials. And sometimes that's natural, sometimes that's through forest fires, and then sometimes it's through industrial activities, putting CO2 into the atmosphere. And then I'll show just a couple examples. Teal carbon was the one that I had a hard time coming to terms with, because this is carbon that's stored in wetlands. And in my opinion, carbon that's stored in wetlands should be brown carbon. But I get the idea, is to compartmentalize all of the carbons of the rainbow. There is an article in Nature Reviews about the colors of carbon. So it is a real thing, but it can just get you thinking about, the living carbon, the green carbon, the inorganic carbon, all of the salts that persist, the calcium carbonate that is all over my landscapes. So sort of to wrap it all back up with these 4 ideas, hopefully, at this point in this conversation, you've learned a little something. You have maybe a small amount of new appreciation for the beauty of soils. You're thinking a little bit about, what is my soil story? Where have I been, and how has soils influenced me, and how have I influenced soils? And in what ways can soils be advocates? So together with my husband, he makes the watercolor, the wooden palettes. I make the paints, and yeah, we just have a really fun time with it. So I see these palettes as a way for us to create art, but then for other people to create art from these art supplies. And these particular palettes are like choose your own adventure. People can select their own colors that they'd like, and I'll hand pour them in here. But maybe I'll just leave you with a couple parting thoughts of, soils are everywhere. And one of the things that we like to say is that because they're everywhere, they're often overlooked. You go out hiking, you drive your car, you park somewhere, and maybe there's beautiful shrubs and flowers, but do you consider the soils that are providing that nourishment, those nutrients, storing that water, filtering out that material that's going through them, cleaning up our water supplies? So these soils were just collected on a long run that I did last summer. And I used Yamina Pressler. She's a great friend and a colleague. She invigorated this technique where you put a swipe of glue stick and then sprinkle the soil. And so you're left with what she calls these little soil memories in your book, whether you're out on a hike or you're just whatever it is that you're doing. I also feel very strongly about education in this space. And so I do have educational palettes that we've created that are used for, I mean, any age of person can be educated. So at this point, it's pretty much targeted at elementary school age children, but we want to get high quality, value added art supplies into lots of people's hands. So I'll leave you with this beautiful suite of pictures that's showing just some of the variety and beauty of soils. You know, you only see the upper centimeter of soil if we're just looking from our people eye view down to the top. So with that, I thank you for your attention and coming to this talk. And I hope you can all see that these beautiful words all say the same thing, and that is soil. And if you see an error, I'm happy to receive criticism about an error because my Google Translate skills only took me so far with some of these. Thank you.
Karen, thank you so much.
Oh my goodness.
This was really, really, really nice. I'm going to turn it over to Amy so she can start asking all the questions that people are starting to add into the chat here. So that was great.
Oh, thanks, Kathy.
Yeah, I wrote down that I just wrote down soil memories. I love this idea of creating soil memories. A lot of times I like doing that with color, natural dyes, like with the plants itself, but I'd never thought of creating memories with soil like that of a place that you maybe travel to. I love that idea. And also I'd like to be your neighbor to get lots of free paint.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
I mean, right?
Yeah. We'll send you like a little, postage box and you can just like pop.
Oh, I'd be happy to. I have lots of things that like I've half used and I don't know what to do with because you don't want to give stuff to people you don't know.
Okay. All right, let's see. Kick it off. I would like to hear, this is Terry Power asking, I would like to hear more about the definition of clay versus soil. Clay is in soil, but not all soils have clay. Clay has unique particles that are flat. Is this true?
Yeah, so clay has two definitions that I use regularly. So let's talk about it as a size fraction. So clay particles are everything that is less than 2 microns. So 0.002 millimeters in diameter. So tiny, tiny pieces. That is what that means. But clay minerals are a group of phyllosilicates. So we all know what phyllodough is. So think of sheets stacked upon each other. Clay minerals are these silicon, aluminum, and oxygen-rich layers that come in many different forms. So most soils have some clay. I mean, if you're out on the beach and it's been washed out and it's 99% sand and 1% silt, sure, maybe that one doesn't have clay, but most have a percent of clay, of some clay particles in there. I don't know if that helped, Terry, but you're right in thinking that there are two ways of thinking about clay.
Okay, if you are emphasizing the colors of the soil, why do you add pigment?
I add pigment because I know that artists like myself enjoy having a wide suite of colors. And so I like to have a sky blue. The only blue that I have made naturally is from Vivianite, and it's very gray. It's very gray, bluish gray is how I would even call it. So it's to get a wider suite of colors for sure.
What a thoughtful journey is the recipe for making soil-based watercolors on your website.
Yeah, there's a highlight in my Instagram that says DIY, and that'll take you there. That'll give you a starter watercolor recipe and then follow a link to part 1 and part 2 figuring it out yourself. Yeah.
You said on stories? Is that?
Yep.
Okay. Put all that in the video post, recording post. Have you ever used volcanic ash?
I sure have. Yeah. If you have come across the color tephra, it was on the like I Lava You cards, if you're at all familiar with some of my products, but the purple tephra actually has volcanic ash in it. In terms of creating a straight ash, I don't have a local source of pure ash here. So I haven't made pure ash, but you could, and it would probably have really cool qualities while you're mulling, because those silt-sized particles that ash is generally composed of, I'm going too tangential here, but we're going. It's that material can be thixotropic. So if you think of like an earthquake, you shake it like this, it liquefies at the surface, and then you can scrape it back and it's dry. It's really cool. If you live in the Pacific Northwest or anywhere else in the world where you have ash.
I love the way that you're explaining all these things that, like with the phyllo dough, or like the, these the kind of more scientific terms. Like, I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. I get what she's saying.
Well, I
So-
also teach introductory soils. So I try my best to, like, we start with that, and then you start with phyllo dough, then Oreo cookies, and then show the chemical structure of a phyllosilicate. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like talking about mordanting, and everybody's like, mordant, to bite. And you're creating fabric that is going to then bite, when it's mordanted, bite down on the color. But you get this visual of it, and you're like, oh yeah, right, of course. Okay, really good question here, Peter. Do you find plastic particles in the soils you sample? If not, that'd be like a really cool little card thing for you to make.
Yeah. So living in Wyoming, we have the lowest population density outside of Alaska, I think, in terms of the United States. We don't probably have as much of a plastic pollution problem in the places I sample, except in town. So in an urban system, living in my town, I did help out a grad student who was studying soils, and all of our houses have alleys in the backyard. And they're terrible places. I would never encourage my children to dig in our alleys just with heavy metals, certainly plastics. There are some soil scientists that are focusing on plastic pollution in soils. I mean, you can find plastic everywhere nowadays, but I have not observed it in a large enough piece for me to see in the soils that I'm using for paint.
Yep. Angela's asking, what watercolor medium do you use?
I share a recipe on the story highlight, but I make it myself. So it is water, gum arabic, so acacia gum, vegetable glycerin. You don't have to use that, but I use it for most of my soils because it helps rewetting. Clove oil I use as an antimicrobial, and honey is used also as a humectant in terms of rewetting. So you have to play around with the ratios. The example I have online doesn't say vegetable glycerin, or maybe the new one does. But yeah, those are the general ingredients. You can buy watercolor media, but it's a tremendous amount of money when you can just mix it up in a mason jar yourself.
Okay, are you a gardener?
I live in Wyoming, I think I said. And you're
one
probably like,
month a
"Gosh,
year out of
yeah, it's harsh. I've lived in a lot of places. I worked on an organic farm when I lived in Idaho, and I certainly was able to grow a lot of produce in California when I lived there. Wyoming's really hard. We usually grow a lot of plants that are beautiful, but they fail to produce consumable. Our carrots do well. But no, I say I have brown thumbs. I get my joy out of digging in the soil. We certainly have plants and stuff, but I'm not, in this climate, I'm not an avid gardener because it hasn't worked out for me in the last 7 years.
But you said that brown is your favorite color too.
Yeah.
So that works with your brown thumbs then.
Yep.
Okay. Are there any soils you would like to source from other countries? maybe something, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So there's, of course, because I want to go to those places and I want to explore them and I want to understand more about the soils from these natural spaces. But I mean, I would go and look at them, but I wouldn't take them home with me because I do feel like there's a misunderstanding about movement of soil across geographical boundaries. Soils are alive. Maybe I didn't say that, but because they are living, they do contain materials that, you know, we don't want to transfer too far. If I processed it in place and converted it into a non-living pigment, then I'd take it home. But anywhere in particular, I would go anywhere to look at people's soil.
Oh, you just get addicted to this stuff. Okay.
I mean, I do want to go to Hawaii to go and observe the beautiful volcanic, like different layers of heating below the lava. But one day I'll take a trip.
There's a place that I used to go to when I was a kid in Maine, and they had springs that were coming out of clay, coming out of this little cliff. And as kids, we would free rappel down with our little ropes and stuff. And I have these dreams when I hear people like you talk. I wish I could go back to that place, but I don't have access to it now to actually collect a little bit and create that soil memory. But you're making my mind think about all the places that I've been that I didn't know how to do what you're teaching us today. Okay. I guess this ties into what Nancy just asked. So she says, say you're on a hike, you see some beautiful soil, and you are on public land or have permission. Would a Ziploc be a good amount to collect? Like, how much do you collect when you're out?
Yeah, so for personal use, like a sandwich baggie, for sure. Cup of soil, you'd have more paint than you would probably use in a while. You might tire of the color. So I think when I make paint on the slab, I would use about a 1/4 cup of pigment. And so if it's super sandy material, then maybe take a little bit more. So you're sure to have those fine particles. But yeah, I think that's a good amount.
Okay, Lynn's asking, have you taken into account the toxicity of certain minerals?
Yeah, sure. There are minerals that are toxic. Many of the minerals that have human health concerns are when they are small particles that are airborne. And so that's, you know, if you were doing the processing, you always want to be masked. And I mean, anytime you're making something that's dusty, you don't, even if you knew what was in it, you don't want small particles of quartz because that can lead to silicosis. And but in terms of like the one pigment I have offered that I think I'm going to stop just because of its challenge to educate and make sure people are safe is malachite is a copper containing material. If you were to take a half pan of paint, you're probably not going to do great harm to yourself. The idea behind the paints is that you use it to paint. You don't eat it, but you just have to hope that people use their good judgment. So everything else that I use is non-toxic. I analyze the soil for a suite of, full chemical compositions before I send it out there.
Okay, I'm not sure I understood well. Can we use sand to make watercolor paint? It's a really interesting, inspiring, and beautiful presentation. Thank you.
So there are people who make watercolor paint out of rocks, obviously, grind them up, either with a mechanical grinder or using a mortar and pestle. I let nature do the work and wait for those small particles to form over hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years because it makes my job and my job a little bit easier. It's not my job. I mean, I guess it's a little bit my job. I can't grind up sand. You'd have to have a quartz, like a mortar and pestle that is extremely, extremely hard. So it's doable. It is totally doable if you want to put the muscle in, break down those particles. Yeah.
Again, that goes back to that workout Kathy and I have been talking about, natural dye workout, now pigment workout. So just more versions, Kathy, of working out with color.
We were talking about upper body strength issues earlier. We wouldn't have those issues.
We wouldn't have it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Can we use the same soil to do watercolor and oil paint?
Sure. Yeah. I don't have experience making oil paint, but if you Google it, I think it's just a matter of adding that same media and mulling it about. There are a bunch of companies that sell natural pigments. They have some tutorials I've seen on oil paints for sure.
You know, and you just made me think too, I know we've had a couple of the pigment people that have been on Feedback Friday, and there is a pigment symposium that they are launching. So I'm going to make sure I put that in the video recording too. But if you, I think it's called Pigments Revealed Symposium. But anyways, I'll
Maybe
have the link.
wild pigments revealed. I
Well,
think so.
I think there's two entities, and
Yeah,
I don't.
Tilka and Melanie. You just
Yes,
sound like you fused them, but I'll have the link for it.
It's a good
Okay.
combo.
Yeah, it is a good combo. What do you know about the way indigenous people used soil-based pigments? I'm sure a lot.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, and some of the talks I give, I go through soil as a media, and soil and charcoal and blood, iron oxides are the first pigments that humans used to create a way to communicate. You know, we call it art, but they made drawings on cave walls. And I think the oldest dated use of pigments is 60,000 years ago. The ones that I've come across in South America are more on the order of tens of thousands of years ago, but absolutely fascinating and super important to remember that this isn't new. This is like the oldest thing that there is, and I'm just enjoying it and doing it and sharing it. So in no way is this new. It's been the original art form. So
I'm gonna take, okay, one more question. Let's see. I'm gonna have one more quick question, Kathy. I just saw your little note. Okay. I live near pumice deposits in Central Oregon. Have you used pumice in your work?
no, I mean, pumice is a type of, as you know, volcanic ejecta, and there will be a lot of volcanic glass in there too. So I mentioned the whole wearing I mean, probably can get away with a good mask. Don't get those silica particles into you, but you could sure, and pumice will grind up easily. It's not going to be as hard as like quartz sand to make smaller. So I would give pumice a go in terms of trying to grind that up. But
It's always exciting too when you're painting to have all those different textures sometimes as part of the picture, if you don't grind them up too much or just kind of whatever, I love those pictures you did where it showed like the different layers of the soil. Like I could see those bigger chunks kind of working their way into that. But anyways, all right. Thank you so much for
Oh, Karen,
speed round of
that was
questions
such a
there.
dream. It
Aw.
really, really was. Wow. Yeah, just looking at the presentation of the materials and the way that you've just thought about how you would share them, both in your own work as well as something that we could help support your company. It's just like, oh my God, this is all the best. This is great. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I have a huge list of things for us to mull over because
Stay
it's
with us.
Earth Day. Happy Earth Day, you guys. Yeah, so hear me out. First of all, did we already? No, we didn't mention this. We have annually for several years now collaborated with Eileen Fisher Renew, which is the clothing take back program of Eileen Fisher, to indigo over dye their fabrics and their clothing in indigo. And so we embark on this crazy journey, usually right before Christmas, where it's freezing and we're in the indigo vats dyeing all of these pieces for them. So this year, it is all online at Eileen Fisher's renew.com website. And Amy had this sad tale of woe about trying to put things in her shopping cart this morning before our Feedback Friday, and someone had already snagged some pieces. So if you're interested, they are there. Oh, you're looking anxious, Amy. We are talking with Eileen Fisher right now about what we would do for a community indigo dip. So stay tuned for that. We may combine it with another community project that we have later on this summer. So check that out, the Eileen Fisher Renew collection. I had my whole team working on it, like 4 or 5 people, and we were in indigo for months on end, and it was really fun. And we we're all smiling in the picture, but there were some moments where we weren't really smiling, but that's okay. That's what indigo is all about. Earth Month. This is Earth Month, and we're offering free domestic retail shipping for purchases over $125. I'm pretty sure it just automatically populates. So if you want it, we're going to send it out like a normal shipment. It won't be any faster or shouldn't be any slower than what we normally do. So don't go pick expedited shipping, because we're using the same shipping method. We're just not that sophisticated on our website. So I hope that makes it clear to you. It's free for any purchases over 125. So we have a whole bunch of other things going on. We have a Die Hard t-shirt fundraiser. And so we got the t-shirts. Here they are. This is the t-shirt. And with the t-shirt, you get a little DIY die kit, complete with droppers, and you can channel Mr. Jason Logan and his amazing ink work using our instructions, and we'll have those on the website. And it's a sliding scale contribution, and it's a lot of fun. We're going to do some tests this weekend now that we have the printed shirts, and we'll have some results for you shortly. So don't miss out on that. And the fundraiser is for Ukraine refugee relief. So that's what 50% of the donation amount goes to that. And it's all detailed in our product, so you can see how much is going to be allocated to Ukraine relief. And then the other part is to encourage additional participation through BIPOC representation in our workshops. And so we're really focusing on being able to offer more assistance, especially for Abu Bakar's artist in residency workshops this summer. So if you're at all interested, please don't hesitate to at least apply, because we're really actively collecting donations in order to help offset the costs of that. Okay, we got 2 other things. One is, of course, speaking of Abu Bakar Fofana, he's our artist in residence this July and August, and we're going to be, we have our workshops up on the site, but we're also adding all sorts of events so that you can participate. If you come for a class, there's probably going to be another activity around your class time, so that you could make a little bit longer in a richer experience. So what we're looking at are, for those of you coming from out of town, or those of you who are coming from in town, we're looking at adding a community indigo dip. We're looking at working with some West African specialty food purveyors for both just specialty meals that we could offer during the workshops. Also a farm dinner and presentation that we want to have with Abu Bakar, because he raises indigo, and he'd love to meet with other indigo raisers, other indigo aficionados, or other people who are just raising dye plants. I think that would be really fascinating. He's also going to be showing in a gallery in town, with a gallery reception and a panel discussion. So it's kind of, action-packed, chock-filled with all sorts of stuff going on. So don't be shy about reaching out and figuring out how we can make this happen for you. It's going to be a great experience. And then, like, if that's not enough for you, we've got the Cape Cod experience happening. It's the Cape Cod Farm and Forage workshop with Sasha Durr, who is one of our favorite teachers. She's the woman who basically broke me out of my mindset of the only good natural dye is a natural dye that was dyed with, 100 years ago and is time tested. Sasha sort of blew that out of the water by using anything that she saw in her landscape and creating beautiful color with it. And so she's going to do that on Coonamessett Farm in Cape Cod on June 27th or June 28th. That will coincide with our 100th anniversary episode.
100th episode. Hey,
of Feedback Friday. So I don't know where we're going to be holding our Feedback Friday, but
It's gonna be
don't
like a variety show is how I'm planning it.
well, don't be surprised if we're in a cornfield, okay? And we're going to be at the farm. We're going to also add to this one fun things that people can do. We're going to have a farm dinner. There's also going to be a potential field trip to look at how dye plants and wastewater interact. And that's a really fascinating study that Amy's doing for water quality on Cape Cod in, starts with an S, no, starts with a B, Barnstable County, Barnstable City.
Well, no, we're gonna be on an Air Force base in
Oh,
in
okay.
Falmouth.
So
Oh,
we're
yeah.
going, okay,
We're going military.
military. Got
Uh-huh.
it. All right,
Yep.
thank you.
No
Um,
problem.
And also there's going to be a natural dye makers pop up during that same time. So again, if you're coming to Cape Cod for a couple of days, there's going to be lots of stuff for you to do. I think that's kind of it. Phew, I
Are
just
you all
sort of
right,
ran the air.
Kathy?
No,
I mean, we
never talked
lost
so
we
much.
lost a bunch of people there who didn't
They
want
were
to
like,
hear.
yeah, bye,
But
lady.
listen, I run a
well.
show for Kathy on Thursday nights, and I was like, oh, she's gonna die when she sees this one. But
All right, so we will be back with another Feedback Friday and make that announcement. Amy's got it kept under wraps right now, but yeah, please join us. We've got lots of stuff going on. And now it's time for everybody to unmute and say hello and goodbye.
Oh, hello. Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, everybody. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too.
Thanks.
Bye.
Wonderful.
Thank
you very much, everyone. Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Happy Earth Day.
hi guys.
All right,
Uh,
I'm going.
what?
I got a phone call.
Oh,
gotta
you're
hop
still
on.
recording.
I am. I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.